Good evening, folks. I think we've got a few people who are joining, and then we can get started here in just a moment. Great. Well, welcome everyone. We're really glad to have folks with us tonight, and I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Rebecca Yazzie, who is the new Civilian Training Dean at the Portland Police Bureau. Just a couple of things before we dive in. One minute. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction of myself. I'll be trying to facilitate tonight, and then we've also, sorry, I'll start that. My name's Stephanie Howard. I work in the Mayor's Office. This is Director of Community Safety. Joining us tonight, we've got Chief Lavelle and Deputy Chief Frome with Dr. Yazzie. I wanted to just briefly give an overview of the process that will follow tonight, and then go into transition into hearing what you're all here to hear, which is Dr. Yazzie. So tonight what we will do, we will use the Q&A function to ask questions. I'll ask questions of Dr. Yazzie. We want to make sure that we get as many questions answered as we can. Of course, this is just the first of many meetings that you will have with Dr. Yazzie, and so we're eager for you all to get to know her and focus on that tonight. As many of you know, the selection of Dr. Yazzie was a very thorough and detailed search, which included representatives from the community, from the amici in our Department of Justice settlement agreement case, and a lot of work went into participating in that process. And I think I can fairly speak for everyone that was involved to say that we're really, really proud and happy to welcome Dr. Yazzie to the city of Portland. So without further ado, Dr. Yazzie, if you would please just give an introduction and maybe just give us a few words about what drew you to this position.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you everyone for joining this evening. It's a warm, lovely evening outside, so appreciate you being inside maybe and joining us. So yeah, a little bit about myself and what drew me to this position, since it's a new position. I have worked in the field of higher education for about 16 years. So teaching adult learners, teaching classrooms in higher education and various disciplines within social services, human services, juvenile justice, lots of really, really fun and exciting disciplines. So what first led me to this position, and when I started to really become more interested in and learn more about it, was my passion for instructing, my passion for teaching, my passion for making sure that we produce the next generation of whatever person that is in the classroom, whether it be a social worker, someone who's going to go out and be a public servant, right, for the Portland Police Bureau, whatever that person or participant is in the classroom. That really drives my passion. So I have, a lot of experience doing that. And when I looked at the position, I thought to myself, there are some really unique opportunities here to be a servant to the city of Portland and to help support the Portland Police Bureau. And some of the other things that really drew me to this position was, again, bringing on some of that experience to help look at curriculum and design, bring my, like I said, years of experience with pedagogy, meaning teaching methods and ways that we can really help enhance the way that we teach so that the outcome that we're looking for is received, it's vetted, it's observable, and to really look at the way that we teach and to help mentor and support instructors, which I really, really have a passion for doing. The other piece that I would add is another reason why I thought this was great for me to maybe throw my hat in the ring was alongside my higher ed experience, I'm not just someone who has been sat in academia for all those 16 years. I have over 20 years of experience working in the continuum of criminal justice, whether that be working with at-risk youth who are involved in and out of detention or in schools. I've worked in juvenile justice closed custody facilities. I've worked in jails serving adults who are incarcerated. So although there are different contexts, I still have one foot in the door and understanding the many challenges that we have to teach about and to in the classroom. And then the other part of this, to close my long-winded introduction, but I really want to make sure you get to know me and who I am. Is the other part of that, what drew me to this position is just having some lived experience as a sibling of two tenured Phoenix police officers, one retired at 30 years and one currently serving on his 29th. So just both passions of teaching and helping people be better instructors and be better learners and participants in the classroom, and then also just having a passion for the great work that the Portland Police Bureau is doing and will continue to do.
Thanks, Dr. Yazzie. We don't have any questions yet, so I'll ask a question myself, and I'll ask if you would maybe elaborate a little bit more on your social work background and kind of how that informs your lens, how that, you know, shapes the way that you teach and design curriculum.
Sure, thanks for asking that. So a couple of pieces of that. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which really just means I have a license to do some clinical practice, but the real training in social work education is what I would really be bringing over. So there's two pieces of that. One, when you are designing and implementing curriculum in an accredited social work program that then produces future social workers, right? We have lots of accrediting standards, lots of accrediting components that we have to embed into the classroom. So my experience helping to shape the next generation of social workers who are going to go out into the community and serve in all these different contexts, right? Because they are serving everywhere, really helps me to bring a framework into teaching with Portland Police Bureau, the training division, and helping to look at curriculum and maybe looking at different standards or expectations or whatever it is that we have to accomplish. The other part of being a social worker is that, well, social worker in the context that I just mentioned in my first response in my practice settings is that social work really allows us to look at a lot of different systems. We're trained in 3 levels, meaning the micro system, the person, the meso system, whether that be a family, school, or a small group, could be a couple of small nonprofits, and then the macro system, which is the policy side. So I just have I'm sort of hardwired for looking for all 3 levels and trying to make any sort of improvement or change. And so that helps a framework, I think, when you come into this kind of position, because you're always looking at multiple levels simultaneously.
That's great. All right, we've got a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll just ask this. These are from Tia Palafox, who's one of our PSEP members. Her questions are, how will you confront institutional racism, and will you be able to teach DEI in your trainings?
So the first question I would say, I haven't started yet with the Portland Police Bureau, so I just want to sort of be able to say, to respond to the first question, I would have to sort of be on the job to really get a good understanding of what's happening here. Of course, the entire bureau is committed to, confronting institutional racism. So as I on board and get more familiar with the bureau, which will take months and months, hopefully I will be working alongside other personnel and folks and the chief and deputy chief to help that movement. So in response to that first part, I hope to be part of that process and really commit to, but I don't know how to answer that just yet because I haven't even started the position, but I'm hopeful that there'll be some opportunities to engage in those discussions. To your second question, which is about diversity, equity, inclusion, I think this piggybacks to Stephanie's last question. As a social worker, even through the standards of teaching, you have to include diversity, equity, inclusion. And the one thing I would say about that is it has to be operationalized, because that's a phrase that I think we value, and I know the Bureau values, but how you embed that in training and in classrooms is challenging. I face that at my higher ed institution as well. So everyone's sort of working in that area to make the best of that implementation. So maybe through curriculum, maybe through other activities, but again, until I really get a lay of the land when I come on board, I would be able to answer that question a lot more robustly, probably in about 3 to 4 months, maybe even 6 months.
And maybe Dr. Yazzie, if you have any examples that of times where you've implemented things like that in your prior work, maybe that would be helpful as well.
Sure, yeah. Well, there's a lot of examples that you could embed diversity, equity, inclusion, and again, looking at the 3 layers, right? Not just one singular lens. It could be the material. Let's say for my classroom, right? We're looking at the syllabus is what we call it in higher ed. So it's just an outline of the course content. And you're looking at each of the weeks, and maybe we're looking at what material is being selected for reading material. Who are the authors, right? Are the authors from one particular authorship or one particular representation of a voice on that particular issue? Or have you chosen a multitude of authors and perspectives on that same issue so that it's not singular focus, but you have diverse voices and voices who have experienced that particular issue on multiple lens and multiple layers. So from a DEI perspective, we look at things as intersectional, right? So you've got gender, race, levels of education, social, economic, and lots of different facets. So that's one example of looking at content to make sure that diversity, equity, inclusion in terms of voice and perspective and content is then represented in that particular course. That's just one small example, but hopefully that's.
Thank you. Another question, what will you do if you get pushback from your trainings?
I get pushback from my trainings. Well, so as an instructor with lots of years of experience, you tend to get pushback sometimes. And I like to reframe pushback as maybe just an invitation to think critically about the content, to think critically about what it is that we could have further conversation about. So I would reframe that to push back to just people, wanting to engage further about the content. And I would probably invite in a conversation and seek to learn their perspective first. Because sometimes as someone who's instructed for many years, there are learning opportunities in that where perhaps I could shift something or the way that I'm instructing, or there's learning opportunities on the other side to kind of clarify, this is how we present the content and this is why. Right. So just kind of gain understanding if that experience happened to me.
Thank you. The next question we have is 3 years from now, what will you look at to assess whether or not you've made the difference you wanted to make?
It's a really good question. And that's part of, that was actually part of our process, right? As we were looking at the interview process. So 3 years, what I'd have to do to even sort of begin to think about that is before I had a set of goals that I'd hope to achieve in 3 years, I would first come in and as I get to know the position and the folks at the training division and all the work that's already being done there, assess, what's working well, assess what are some of the directives or other guidelines that folks want to look into within the first 6 months to a year. And then I would devise goals. And so, I hope within 3 years, one of my first goals is that I start to build relationships with people at the training division, relationships and rapport, a strengthened one between me and my colleagues at the training division and the instructors there. That's probably my first goal, to make sure I look back on to see if I've accomplished that. In this kind of a role, and especially with instructing and helping mentor instructors, relationship building is super crucial, and it's really important. The other goals that would come, again, it's hard for me to kind of predict those right off the bat because I don't have a good, clear understanding of everything just yet. But I would hope that some of those outcomes would illuminate, maybe instructors' perceptions of how they've learned to develop curriculum, or ways that they've grown in teaching, or, working with Deputy Chief and the lieutenant there at the training division, collaboratively looking at some goals to see, what we hope to achieve. But, apologize for not having an explicit 3-year plan just yet, but I think that's how I would approach it.
Another question, will you be able to include training on working with the LGBTQIA+ community? They have been really hurt and dismissed by the Bureau. So I don't know if we have existing content.
We do. We actually rolled out a training recently that you may have seen in the news. It had some comments made by Bureau members that were concerning for sure. And I think the real story there to me is that we're doing this work, and it's new work. It's work that the Police Bureau previously hasn't done around the LGBTQIA2S+ policy that we now have. And I think there'll be an opportunity for Dr. Yazzie to participate in all those kind of overarching academic trainings, and her input I think will be very valuable. But I think the real message there is we value that community and that relationship, which is why we've rolled out the training and done the work to try to put some things on paper and do some things that will help officers have the tools to interact and build better relationships with that demographic in the city.
And Dr. Yazzie, while we're waiting for another question, I think one question I would pose is, how do you get buy-in when you're trying to teach something in a new environment, or something that is material that maybe is not exactly being completely bought into by the folks that you're teaching? Do you have any examples or strategies that you could share about how you would go about getting that buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are opportunities, I think, to design or include whatever it is that you have in terms of a content, whether it's video, reading, content, activity, whatever it is, right? To ensure that whatever it is that you're kind of presenting on, you hope and you create a framework that says, this is what our agency, organization, or bureau, right, really wants you to learn, and we value this. And there's going to be room for, participants in that training to have various perspectives. And so I think the best way that I've done that in my classroom is to anticipate that there might be, when I say sensitive content, I don't mean that the LGBTQI is sensitive content. I just mean any content that we know might elicit or evoke a lot of different perspectives that might not be as uniform, right? So it's like, and I mean like a collective, whereas there's other easy topics, I do in the classroom, maybe on ethics or something that just seem pretty clear. There's, 95% of people are like totally on board. And so there are other content, so that I think if you anticipate that, you can build that into the material, you can build in more engaging activities to then either debrief the material or make room for questions. So I think it's in the design of how you present material that you anticipate multiple perspectives, right? And so that's instructing, that's teaching. Otherwise, it would just be sort of a top-down process, and that's not optimal for learning, true learning, in my perspective.
Thank you. All right, next question. How can you build in feedback and actually measure changes in behavior that hopefully result from your training?
It's a good question. So the one other thing that I bring to the table is a doctoral mindset of how do we, and I know we have a great research team at the training division, and the Portland Police Bureau has a great research team and a data team. So, I would be working collaboratively with that team, because I know that there's already research design and frameworks and specific indicators and outcomes that they use to look at progress towards a particular goal, right? So there's already some indicators that we might be pulling from surveys, participant satisfaction surveys. I don't know what they're called here just yet, but in my experience, it's course evaluations, right? So we look at specific indicators that we ask the participants in the class or the course to then rate the instructor. And each entity is looking for certain things. It could be the way that the instructor engages. It could be, was this person a content expert in this? Did they bring in, DEI? Like, were there any representation of diverse perspectives? So you can rate somebody, right? You can evaluate just on the instruction alone in one way. So that could be an idea. And again, without being in this position, there might be something already similar. But I would say that it would be somewhat challenging just to try to identify outcomes right off the bat without knowing which things really have a direct influence. For example, I may see behavior change in the classroom or through instruction, but that may not yield a reduction in X, Y, and Z outside the classroom. Those are mediating variables so just, I guess my point to make this a less complicated response is I think there are multiple things that I will have the ability to oversee and to be able to construct in terms of how do we evaluate, what are we looking for, what are those indicators of success, and then there's going to be a whole layer of things that happen outside of the training division that also would need to be considered.
Great. Next question. How much are you going to include behavioral health crises and or mental illness population in your trainings?
So again, what I will hope to do when I get on board in June and as I'm learning is I have to get a really good understanding of what's currently being provided, because I know there's some material that's already provided in the curriculum. So question to that was, of course, I'm sure there will be that material because there already is that material. But you know, the amount, the content, what it looks like, again, collaboratively working with folks at the training division and folks who are already providing that training to get a good understanding of where they see that, where they assess it to be, and if there's opportunities to modify, add, change. So, you know, I anticipate that that'll be something that I'll be involved in, but don't yet know how to directly answer that without knowing the full curriculum.
In what ways might your role be focused on training related to officer or first responder mental health and self-awareness?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I think I read that a little too fast. In what ways might your role be focused on training related to officer or first responder mental health and self-awareness? And I'm interpreting that as like self-care, you know, I may be interpreting that wrong. That's how I read that question.
Yeah, that is a great question. So learning a little bit about the role, and then what components sort of are connected to the training division.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit. So, you know, the training division currently houses our employee assistance program, our wellness program. Most everything that focuses on officer health are located out in the training division. So I think as Dr. Yazzie starts to learn more about the tools in her toolbox, I think that she'll probably be in a much better place to tell us exactly how that's going to work later. But I don't know, unless you got some amazing idea right in this 5 seconds that, you know.
No, like I said, I anticipate that will be part of this, and definitely looking forward to that. But until I see what's currently being done, it's kind of hard to answer.
I would say also too, that is a very important and critical piece, I think, for the police bureau going forward, is officer wellness. It plays a big role in retention. It plays a big role in attracting officers to apply also. And I think our wellness officer, our EAP program, and the training division have made some really good steps around officer wellness too. So as we incorporate, you know, some more programming around that with some of the funding we got in the previous budget, we're really looking forward to expanding kind of our wellness package. And I think there'll be some really good things that come out of it in the future.
Great. Next question. The public release of post-training survey results may have harmed the relationship between Bureau members and the training division. What is your vision for restoring and maintaining the confidence of Bureau members, especially when making controversial changes?
That might also be a question.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you could start off. I'll follow up.
Yeah, I mean, the issue that's referenced is Chief's office made the decision to release the comments that had been submitted following the LGBTQ policy training in response to something that had been written about us during one of our review reports. And yeah, most of the officers and sergeants and professional staff that made these comments did so believing that it was going to be used by the training division and not kind of thrown out there. So I can see where the employees would feel a little betrayed. Their names are not associated with it. We had always hoped that the comments were going to be used to improve the training that we do, provide some feedback to the people that had created the training. I think our next step is that we just need to keep going back and saying, we do need your feedback, all right? We had to release the statements, or else it was going to continue to just have people question what exactly was said, how bad is the problem. You know, I know I've heard the chief say in other locations that when you look at all of those comments as a whole, there's a lot of very positive comments that came out of that same training. Yes, there are some that clearly indicate people did not appreciate the training, were not ready for the training, or maybe never will be ready for that training. But as a bureau, we're a learning organization. We'll we'll take our lump in trust, and then you start building on trust by just continuing to be reaching out to them, telling them we still continue to need their help. You know, I was at a training last week, or no, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now at this point, and people are still submitting comments. I mean, I was in the class at the end, and so people are still doing it. I don't think we've completely destroyed the appetite for people to leave comments and training.
Yeah, I think for us it is crucial. And even if the comments and the feedback you get in the survey format is difficult to receive sometimes, it does give you a sense of where you're at. Sometimes you maybe need to go back and reevaluate how you're delivering the training, or maybe if you need to approach it from a different, just a different perspective in total. But I think for us, having that feedback is very valuable because it gives you a sense of kind of how you're approaching the work, but how it's being received by the members that you're trying to get the buy-in from. And I think going forward, like Deputy Chief said, we're going to have to figure out a way to still extract that feedback from the members, and that honest feedback will inform a lot of Dr. Yazzie's work and other folks in the training division.
And I would just add that, you know, being an instructor for many years, you lean into those comments, evaluation comments, and so I think it's a good process. And, you know, to the question of, I would continue that process, right? Just getting feedback is really important. And leaning into that is what makes, you know, what makes it sort of a process that's collaborative and working, everyone's working towards the same goal of learning in a way that's respectful to everybody. So.
Thank you. Next question, will you be available to the different police and city advisory groups to be a guest speaker or work with the different groups?
So I envision in this role, I'll have a lot of opportunity to engage with community councils. Forgive me, I don't know all of the names and acronyms just yet, but I will learn them. So I'm sure there might be room in there. Again, once I get kind of solidified and my feet wet in the position. But I think that might be part of the role of helping to support and assist some of the different councils and being able to speak to what we're doing. Some of the major accomplishments at the training division.
The next question is kind of a good piggyback on that question. What is your vision for the role or involvement of community members in training division and the development of training?
So my understanding now is there's a council. There's an existing council that helps you know, they meet regularly, right, to help give input. I think that will continue to be utilized in a efficient manner as it has been. And again, within the existing framework that's already in process, I definitely look forward to meeting everybody on those councils or those existing stakeholder groups, right, to continue to work together and learn their perspective. So I think that process that's already here will continue. And again, once I step into the role, I'll be able to give a much more definite answer to that as I see how things are going.
This question, I think, dovetails nicely with that. So it says, it's great to have the chance to welcome you, but it's a little early to ask you so many detailed questions when you haven't even started working in the Bureau. Can we have another meeting in 6 months or so? I think the answer is pretty clearly yes, we sure can.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. A critical problem facing the PPB is a lack of trust between the PPB and communities, within the PPB, and even between the PPB and City Hall. How can you help mitigate or alleviate this problem?
It's a heavy lift for you.
Yeah. Well, building trust in any context takes time. You know, it's a process. So I think those all sound like things that, again, the efforts are currently underway. And this is where, again, the social work in me also kind of brings out that building trust, repairing trust, establishing trust is going to take a lot of engagement and a lot of gaining perspective and understanding on all sides. So the way that I would accomplish that is a foundation of, you know, internal. I mean, I have a great commitment when I step onto the Portland Police Bureau to, again, build rapport and get to know as many people as I can. And then as those other layers that you just mentioned, Stephanie, you know, that's then going to be part of that multifaceted process. And that will, of course, be part of what I hope to do in the coming months and years.
Thanks. All right, next question. Are you prepared to deal with the contradiction of trying to get police to communicate and de-escalate when they're authorized to use force up to deadly force?
So again, what I'm prepared to do is to help in this role, work with the Bureau and the training division and support and augment, right, some of the things that they've already identified as places that they really, you know, want to focus on. And I know that's been part of the work that's being done here, and you know, nationally has and will continue to be, you know, I'm sure. So am I prepared? Yes, I'm prepared. And I know that that is something that will be probably part of a lot of discussions and discourse, but as it relates to training, right, to bring it back to my role in training and instructing, you know, being open to those conversations and just anticipating critical dialogue, which is important to have if we're gonna get to wherever we want to be. Because I don't think we're alone. This city is not alone in that. So.
Well, while we wait for more questions, Dr. Yazzie, could you maybe elaborate a little bit on you know, some of your experiences in teaching and maybe some of the parallels that you anticipate being, you know, in this role here? Understanding, of course, you haven't started again.
Sure, yeah. And I'll be diplomatic with the agencies that I've worked with before. I've worked with a lot of government county agencies. You know, there's been a time in my career, you know, for some of you might know, let's say in correctional settings, right? The use of seclusion and restraint, different types of methods that we have to use sometimes in those environments are, there's always movements and strategies to try to reduce that, right? Because it's harmful to a lot of different people and also the personnel who have to engage in that. So one example of that is, you know, about 10 years ago, the agency I worked for, we tried to implement some trauma-informed strategies, right, that would help with that. And what's difficult is that it doesn't always align, you know, there's different perspectives and there's different value systems. And so, you know, in my teaching experience, when I have to train on that or help come alongside our personnel who are frontline custodial staff, you know, the question was asked earlier, buy-in. Well, we have to sort of understand that there's valid perspectives on both sides, and there's valid perspectives that lie in between. So it's not just, you know, I want to teach you this new thing and you must do it, which is, you know, just kind of top-down directive. But if we really want to see the change and we really want to see people understand what's behind that change and the reason for the change, you know, then that takes more engagement. It takes more follow-up. It takes more, you know, we might use examples in the training to help them see why is it valuable. So I'm not new to having to teach something that, again, might elicit different perspectives based on where you're at in that continuum. But I think that you can get, and don't get me wrong, you know, you can't always get 100% on one particular perspective, but if you can move the needle a little bit, that tends to help.
All right, we've got a question. This job seems very challenging and a very big job. And I think there's a smiley face after this question, which says, are you ready? And is it the chief who will be your backup, or do you have a team? That might be a better question for one of the chiefs. It's kind of a structural.
I'm gonna jump
Yeah, you can start. I'll follow up.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, the Portland Police Bureau is run by Chief Lavelle. All right, so he has goals and ideas of where he wants us to be. So a lot of this really begins in his mind as he conveys it out. The way this is currently set up, the Dean of Training reports to me as the Deputy Chief. My next big challenge as the Deputy Chief is to make sure that when she comes on, we do a great job of onboarding. We figure out what support she's going to need. We figure out what are realistic timelines and expectations for when we can kind of see deliverables. She already has a team and she doesn't even know it. She has the entire training division that is awaiting for her to get there. It's little tiny things. It's my understanding we've already identified, we have professional staff that have been hired that will be her direct reports. She has curriculum development people. She has video people. She has the subject matter experts that are out there. That's all her team. But when it really comes down to it, if she is ever feeling at a point where she is just simply not being supportive, she's got me to come to immediately, and then we'll probably sit down with the chief and we'll go from there.
Yeah, our goal is to really make sure Dr. Yazzie has everything she needs to be successful. This is a new position, so it's very difficult to sit here today and say this is exactly how it's going to look or work out. But there is a lot of support at the training division. There's a lot of support for her at the chief's office. And we had the opportunity to meet about a week or so ago and talk about, just kind of bigger picture vision. And one of the things I told her is, we have people who are going to spend a career here. There might be here 25, 30 years. How do we take that early member and really grow them over that time period? Not just trainings to keep certifications or to satisfy requirements, but really seek growth and knowledge and really kind of a building of their not only experience, but their knowledge, and just create a better member at the end of that 25, 30 years. How do we build that kind of stuff in? And those are kind of the concepts and the theories that we talked about. So I think that's really an important way to look at it over someone's 25, 30-year career. So we're really excited and happy to have Dr. Yazzie on board, and we're going to do everything that we can to make it really fruitful for her and us.
And I'm gonna keep rambling just a little bit, just to kind of tell this group why I'm excited that we finally have this position filled. The Portland Police Bureau's training division has been doing great work. All right, I can think of various times in the past during my career where I would say that not all the training was as good or as engaging as I think it's been recently. But that's, in some ways, that's almost through just sheer force of will and dumb luck that we've been able to find people that have been able to get that in place. Because we've never looked to the outside and said, like, hey, let's bring someone in who actually understands curriculum development. Let's bring in someone that actually understands adult learning. Now we've got that person, and maybe we're not asking her write every piece of curriculum that we've got here. We're asking her teach the training division how to up its game and do a better job in developing that curriculum aimed at an adult learner. She's still going to have all the SMEs that are going to be there that are going to tell her, hey, we need to do this training this year because the state requires this many hours of use of force training, this many hours of leadership training, this many hours of whatever type of training to maintain certifications. And then we have a training needs assessment that is an ongoing document of what have we identified as things that we need to keep working on. And then that's where she's going to be able to come in and help prioritize where she thinks this will go in the larger big scheme of how she would like to see training roll out within the training division. So that's my piece.
And I honestly think we can tie it back to that previous question about trust. Even with the comments that were mentioned before, we released everything from the training, the videos the chiefs and I made talking about and introducing the training, just out of transparency, so the community can have access to it and see it. And then the fact that, even with our focus intervention team, going back to do gun violence work, that work now has community voice to it, community members that are a part of it. And then this role, a new role in the training division that has a non-police person with years of experience in adult learning to look at how we're doing things. I think all those are little steps that we're taking to do things differently to try to be better and then build that trust with community.
And I'll just add to the first part with the smiley face. I'm ready for this position. I think it'll be an amazing opportunity to work with the team that's just already committed, as you just heard before, to really make the training, enhance the training that's already, the stuff that's already going on. And I think to me that's very exciting. And again, just having a career in systems where you just got to stay grounded and committed for the long haul. I look forward to that because that's kind of where I like to be.
And I may just follow up on what you just said, Dr. Yazzie. I don't know that I gave you enough space earlier to really elaborate on your experience in managing programs and developing systems. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, throughout my practice experience, I've overseen, mental health programs in institutions. I've overseen, I'm just going to kind of do a quick list as they all kind of apply in some ways. I've overseen inpatient substance abuse programs in juvenile correction facilities that have lots of standards and OARs and ORSs to be able to operate. I've overseen curriculum programs. I've designed new curriculum programs to accreditation standards and to requirements of the discipline, as I mentioned earlier. And so there are, in terms of program development and strategic planning, that's always been part of my practice skill set. And even working with, I've worked a little bit with the Oregon Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision, did some work with them, strategically looking at trauma-informed practices and what does that look like in this sort of a setting. So just always looking programmatically, those are exciting things to me because it takes a while to get there, but once you see it moving, it's pretty exciting. And not only does the organization get to celebrate those successes, but the trust that's been built with people who participate in that process gets even stronger.
The next thing is, it's not a question, it's a comment, but I'm going to ask a question afterwards. The comment is not a question, but I'm thankful you're local. And I think that is probably a sentiment that's common among a lot of folks who are interested in this position. Could you just speak a little bit about how you view being, someone who's from the metro area and who, how you see that playing into your work at the PPB?
Yeah, Portland, I've lived here for a really long time, and Portland is a really, really, really inclusive community. And I think Portland has some really great facets of it. Would always love to see more freeways, but that's okay. I think just the vitality in this community, and also, as many cities across the country in the last 2 or 3 years with global pandemics and all kinds of stuff going on, has also experienced its own journey. And I think to me, it's something that represents the heart of the city. And so Portland to me is just a really unique city. And I've lived in other places, but I've been here for about 18 years now. And the Pacific Northwest and particularly Portland has really grown on me. What I particularly like is the fact that, one, I would say I've learned so much about the Portland Police Bureau and the work that they've done to establish themselves in the community with the community members, and still working in that trajectory, but also the energy and the passion that the community has in participating in building a stronger city. And so I think to me that those are places that I want to be.
All right, next question. Do you envision using contact surveys to direct the training division curriculum? Same question regarding body-worn cameras, unless it's too soon to ask. Thanks. This is a question from Barbara Anish, who you will get to know, I think. But I think it's probably too soon to ask on body cams. But maybe you could speak to whether you envision using contact surveys to inform curriculum development.
Yeah, I think even with evaluation methods, it's still too soon to comment on that. I really would like to know what the current practices are with surveys and how we get feedback first before I get into that.
All right. Let's see. Here's a question from Mark Porras. Community members are concerned that some police officers aren't always truthful. Is there something you can do to teach and encourage honesty?
Well, I know that currently there's lots of, I mean, if you teach from a core values perspective, right, which I know mission and all these other, again, not seeing all the curriculum in front of me or how the teaching is currently done, but I envision that integrity is part of, right, part of training and probably embedded in a lot of the engagement at the training division. So I trust that that's happening already. But you know, how would I instill that? I would continue to make that a value that is embedded in the way that we teach, in the way that we learn, so that you hope that that carries on. So yeah, that's I think that's a question that I would just say probably a lot of that work is already happening. And you know, I think from my experience too in the classroom, again, let's take social work as an example. I can teach to ethics. And I can teach to integrity and dignity and worth of human relationships and all the values, right? The core values that embed in that curriculum or content or whatever. And, you know, I'm not naive to know that there's sometimes that, you know, people just miss it. And that's not necessarily a failure of the whole training or course. It's just we're human and sometimes we have to get more support. So.
I think once we get through our pilot and move into implementation, our body worn camera program is going to do more for ensuring honest behavior than anything that we could probably teach.
Great. Well, we're waiting for some more questions to come in. Dr. Yazzie, anything that we haven't asked about so far that you think would be worth you know, talking about as folks get to know you a little bit?
Well, I really enjoy well, in my right, commencement celebrations, graduations, folks who finish trainings, accomplish trainings. I think that's one of the reasons why I've continued to teach for as long as I have. I just really enjoy, as mentioned here earlier, just even opportunities for folks who've had a lifelong career with Portland Police Bureau, right? Or they see a tenure here in their professional relationship with the Bureau, like helping people accomplish those, you know, sort of steps in their career that they want to do. That's one thing I would just share, that I think I bring such an excitement about that I think, and not that that's not already here, but it really helps, I think, drive excitement in the classroom when you're helping people to see that this will, you know, this experience or this course or this class or this certificate or whatever will help you reach those career goals. So you know, in academia, I'm doing really career development, you know, but we're not calling that in the classroom necessarily, but it's career development. It's helping people hone, you know, their skills and their you know, unique interests with special populations, and that's really exciting to me. And I think just, you know, for people to know that ultimately with everything else that's, you know, the technical pieces that we talked about, ultimately I feel like that's something that I'm really gonna bring and hope to continue.
I'll ask kind of a follow-up question because as I'm sure, you know, you're well aware, when you're training sort of a population that may have received training in different schools of thought, how do you envision trying to, you know, bring people along when they're learning something that may be contrary to things they learned, you know, years and years ago? Yeah.
You know, I think with hopefully what we're using in terms of material and best ways, I'm going to use the phrase best practices, right? So in corrections, trauma-informed care wasn't a thing 15 years ago, but the literature and what we knew and what we learned about trauma and, you know, trauma on the brain and seclusion and isolation, like now we have all this new information. So I think part of it is, yeah, we might have learned this, learned about this particular concept 5 years ago or last year even, but with some of these things there might be, you know, new practices, more and more emerging practices that we don't know about, or we're learning from other you know, bureaus across the country what they're doing in their training. And so I think there's a way to sort of say we've been introduced to this concept in this way in the past, and then sort of scaffold off of that. I think it's important to teach in my classrooms. I try not to tell people throw everything out. Don't do that. Like, it's integrated learning. And I think as an adult learner and someone who is a career professional, you've got to integrate learning. So I think the worst thing I could do, and I hope I will not do this, is to just sort of say, oh, that stuff, you know, don't feel, not that I would do that. But so I think that's the way that I approach that, is that particularly in this work, and a lot of work where policy is moving all the time, you know, information about stress and trauma is coming out all the time. So we just have to kind of be in cadence with what we know about the concept. And sometimes that changes over time, and kind of leading into that, and not necessarily say, let's just get rid of this old stuff, right? We don't, that's not integrated learning.
That's great. We're still waiting for more questions, which is surprising. We normally aren't short on questions in these kinds of things. So, you know, I don't know if there's anything else you can sort of speak to. We've talked about some of the, you know, curriculum development and the need for you to get in and understand the systems in place before you can really speak to how do you change them. But can you speak a little bit more generally about maybe your experience in adult education, and you mentioned career development and how those two things kind of interplay?
Yeah, so okay, so just again using my experience with social work education, or just, you know, just a discipline that has an accrediting body and lots of standards, and they change over time. You know, before I'm leaving George Fox, I'm having to transition our current curriculum to a whole new set of standards because they just changed. So but what I mean by adult learning and how you design and implement curriculum, and pedagogy, meaning, like, you know, Deputy Chief Perlman was talking about, like, how we engage in the classroom and the different methods, right? There's that. And then here's a great example. I teach a class on substance abuse, and some of the students in that class come into the class just saying, nope, I'll never do this in my career. Don't want to, but I have to take this class. Or, right, I have no interest or passion, but I have to take this class. And I think if you can, it doesn't happen 100% of the time, but I think the nuance and the merging of the curriculum design, engagement, pedagogy methods, and the way that we engage folks in learning can sometimes help propel an interest in an area that was kind of dormant before, right? And so that's an example where someone might say, I don't believe in any of these models that you just talked about. By the end of that class, I've had students say, 16 weeks ago, I would have never worked with this population for X, Y, and Z reasons. They're applying for those jobs out of grad school. And to me, that's an example of where sometimes if you create opportunities where people are learning something new or changing perspective on something they've already learned, that dance can become very fruitful in their career development. And so that's an example, you know, where I've seen just with students in particular, but I hope that could really carry over with the folks in the training, you know, trainings that we're doing.
All right, we have another question from Mark Porras. Can you speak to the importance of language? For instance, the Bureau recently stopped saying crowd control, but now says public order, which in Mark's opinion sounds a bit Orwellian.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the history of the Portland Police Bureau is filled with us coming up with different terms or different names for different things, depending on how it goes. Generally speaking, I think the training division is going to be committed to developing curriculum using best standards, and whatever the terms that are being used are probably going to be those that are already existing in literature, already existing in trainings elsewhere. I think that's the direction you're probably going to see the training division go. And I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think language matters in a lot of contexts, right? I was just preparing a lesson plan for something at my university, but and it was speaking to just that. But I think language matters, and also, as Deputy Heach just mentioned, it's also important to be congruent with what the industry or the discipline or best practices is. You know, to create continuity around language and you know, eliminating confusion around language, and also language that has been sort of vetted in other, places in which they're teaching the same concept. So I think language is important, but it's always going to be an evolving, probably review and practice. And again, that's not unique. That happens in social work as well, or in places of higher education. So it matters, and I think that's a great direction that Deputy Chief just mentioned.
Sorry, there's like a smoke alarm going off in my house right now, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on with that. Don't have any questions just yet. I'm going to put one or both of the chiefs on the spot to see if there's anything we might ask Dr. Yazzie to elaborate on, because we've gotten the pleasure of talking with her and getting to know her, and I think there are some aspects that we might be able to force her to highlight.
Well, I've got a couple that probably get to like what the average Portlander really wants to know about the doctor. This is Portland, so dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Okay, and then if you could spend a day, we suddenly said we're canceling work at the police bureau. Where can you get to within one day that you would want to spend that day?
The gorge, hiking with my dogs.
All right, there you go. And now people don't like my questions, and I can see that they're starting to have some show up in the Q&A.
Great. All right, so here's a question. Will you be at the PPV position as a full-time employee? In other words, 100% of your working time. And are you still teaching or have ties to other academic entities? And which ones?
I'm sorry, repeat that last part.
And which ones?
Oh,
if yes.
Gotcha. I will be a full-time employee, yes, with the Portland Police Bureau. And I will not have any formal ties. I mean, I'll have partnerships, right, in the relationships that I built with institutions that, where I'm at, George Fox, Portland State University, University of Portland. So all of the current partnerships and relationships, but I won't be formally, teaching probably for a while, just to get fully committed into this position.
I'll ask a question as well. So, you've some diverse and parallel experience with, as you mentioned before, in the spectrum of the criminal justice system. But having not been a police officer before, can you maybe elaborate on how you plan to be, to learn this curriculum and incorporate that into your development of it in this context?
Yeah, I mean, first, again, as was mentioned earlier, we have a cadre of current personnel who are, looking at curriculum, teaching, and so I obviously want to learn from them, really engage with them and learn and want to know what their perspectives are in this process. And I think that's one thing that I'm going to lean into, is that I have to rely on those folks who are sworn, who have done this work at the ground level. And part of that will be hopefully shadowing as much as I can, going on ride-alongs if I can. I really, really, really want to learn as much as I can within the purview of this, right, to help inform curriculum and design on that front. What's the day in the life of this particular type of skill set? So, and then again, leaning on the current instructors who already have lots of experience in these content areas. But my hope is to really, spend time in each of those areas that relate to the training, because we do in-service, and there's academy, and there's leadership, and there's all kinds of stuff. So I just really hope, and I believe that will be allotted in my onboarding, and as I get to know, the role. So that's kind of my plan, and I hope that will come to fruition.
And Dr. Yazzie, do you see it as an advantage or strength, maybe coming from a different perspective than that? Can you talk about how you maybe view that different perspective in this role?
Sure. I think it's a strength. I think that I you know, again, I'm not a sworn officer, and I absolutely I'm going to be leaning on those folks who have that tremendous experience, and their experience is super valuable, and is going to help me understand, right? First and foremost, this is a different context, it's a different culture, it's a different everything, just like it would be if I were going to different contexts in my other practice setting. So you have to learn first, and you have to really seek to understand first before you really get into the technical pieces of your job. And the second part is, I just think, you know, strength, I feel like I'm just a committed professional, and hopefully bringing a perspective that can add to what's already here, and maybe a set of eyes that help to add to curiosity, right? And that's really all that I hope to bring.
I'll throw in one if you would allow me, Stephanie.
Of course.
So Dr. Yazzie, if you had the magic easy button and you could fix one problem in either education or criminal justice, what would it be?
I would say I'm going to tackle higher ed first. From an equity perspective, I think the unfortunate rising costs of education is just crucial. That's one that I see, again, from an equity group, is just, you know, who gets to go to college, right? And I know Oregon's, again, really unique. There's a lot of really good programs in high schools to get tuition, but that's not everywhere. And I think that's one of the main ones, because to me that stifles who we bring into. Not that everyone needs to go to college, just want to say that. Some people choose that, and it's okay if you don't, but it stifles the ability to bring in, right, different perspectives and people with lived experience. And if you don't have a reasonable cost for tuition, it's going to be a challenge.
All right, we've got a question. Will you be reviewing all trainings for PPB members, sworn and non-sworn? Coming, of course, from the training division, but also from the EIO office and any other source of training. I think that might be a little bit of a chief's question.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that at some point it's going to have her stamp of approval on it. I mean, at least that's the way I always view the position. She's not going to write everything.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, as the director of the training that's going on in there, there's going to have to be some level of, I'm aware of what is going on in my classrooms.
And here's another question that sort of complements that last one. I know there are so many required trainings of sworn officers now. Are you taking all of those over, some of them, or will you be adding totally different trainings? And that might also be a chief from question on logistics.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I hit on this a little bit earlier in that there are a lot of required trainings that officers must have in order to maintain certification. But then, I mean, if I'm going to compare this to college, maybe because I just had this conversation with my son, you've got your core courses and you've got your electives, and the state pretty much dictates what they have to do for their major. But then we have a lot of room within the Bureau here to have kind of these electives, except the officers don't get to elect them. We get to elect what they're going to have. And I think that that goes back to that needs assessment that I had mentioned. But I think that after the doctor has been here for a while and is definitely filling into the role, I think that's where we're going to see her ability to do long range thoughts about the direction that we want to take in trainings that build upon each other, methods of instruction that we can use over and over to gain familiarity. And then at that point, that's when she's really going to have the ability to influence how those electives actually start to overlap with the required. Because we don't get these courses from the state. We know more or less what we have to do in terms of like core idea. But then it's up to us to actually develop what's inside of them. And I think that's where you start looking at that holistic approach to education. But like right now, we pretty much, you don't have to do anything right away. We pretty much got the next year's training almost figured out. So, I mean, they're always on a delay here.
And maybe, I think maybe to get to another piece of that question, I think, you know, in terms of Dr. Yazzie's role, there are many instructors at the training division. So Dr. Yazzie is not going to be the one that's doing every training that's happening, but
He's
maybe
Oh,
maybe could you kind of just elaborate on how that works and sort of the
Yeah.
the role that she has among those trainers?
well, I'll tell you what I think it is, and then she can tell me where I'm wrong. Yeah, we already have a lot of trainers that already exist at the training division. Almost all of them are subject matter experts in different fields. They have been working to put together curriculum. We have curriculum guidelines that we use to make sure that every class kind of has a class outline, so that if the instructor was unable to be there that day, you could have someone else come in and still hit all the same things that they need to do. Not like in high school or something where the substitute showed up and said, I have no idea what you're going to do, watch a movie. No, I mean, we have to provide training on those days. I see the director of training's role as focusing on what can we do to ensure that we are doing top-notch curriculum development, making sure that our course outlines are where they need to be. Start working on instructor development. How do we identify, recruit, and train instructors to make them not just great, but excellent in the field of adult learning? And then probably at some point, there's going to be that what some people have already talked about. We're going to get to how do we start trying to measure outcomes? How do we start figuring out, hey, we did this training the old way in this year, but then we tried this new method of instruction. Is there anything that we can learn about what we think about retention down the road? You know, that's one thing that we've never really done in the police bureau, is that you get trained, you might have a little quiz on what it's going to be, but we never come back to you a year later and give you a second quiz to see how much of it you're retaining. I don't know. Maybe that's an awful idea.
And it's important to remember too, not all of the training that we do is developed by us. We just went through CPR training, and like that is something that is given to us. It's packaged and everyone gets it, and everyone gets the same one, and it's not developed by the police bureau. And there's some legal trainings. We do legal updates and things of that nature. It's really kind of put together by city attorneys and then kind of presented. So I think, you know, for our purpose, we really want to have someone in there who has just kind of an overall view of how we're training police bureau members, sworn officers, our professional staff, and just make sure it's really in accordance with the organizational values, and it's really designed to give the best product and have us in a position to have the best prepared, equipped, and great people.
And then the last piece of this is I'm really hoping that we are an amazing employer and that we can get you to stay here long term. Because that's the other reason that having someone with the doctor's credentials is going to be amazing for us, is hopefully she can be here long enough for all these seeds to actually grow and we see what kind of fruit we get. We've always had captains, lieutenants, officers that rotate through the training division, and sometimes it creates a lack of consistency. And I think we all know that, like, for those of us that went to college, you definitely had some brand new professors that were absolutely amazing with their energy and their enthusiasm, but then you also look forward to that professor or someone who had been around for a long time because they just simply knew everything and had such a master's touch at their ability to deliver things. And a lot of times those programs had deans that had been there for years and years and years as they had cultivated those programs. That's what we want. We need someone who can be here hopefully for years and years and cultivate our training.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. We as an organization turn over a lot. We move people, they retire, we promote them. And I think there's some roles here that really, really require consistency. Like in my mind, I think of the training division and the personnel division as two, that we would really benefit from having people in place for a long period of time.
You know, kind of along this sort of line here, Dr. Yazzie, could you speak a little bit about your approach to evaluating teachers or trainers, and how you would go about addressing, any changes that you'd like to see in those positions?
Sure. I mean, I can speak to what I've done in my current role, and then, again, hopefully some of that would apply. It just depends on what, when I step on what already being done. But yeah, I mean, it's very common, right? As Deputy Chief talked about, when you have like a dean of a college, and then you've got multiple faculty, some are entry-level faculty, some are tenured faculty, right? So, my job is to always mentor and support the new faculty. And sometimes that's literally observing classrooms. It might not be the whole class, but it might be a portion of it. It's helping to helping to support them to maximize classroom engagement and classroom management, which, classroom management doesn't necessarily mean it's for the youngsters in a class. It's just how you structure your class and how I use a 4-quarter method, right? How you kind of break things up. So our new faculty, a lot of that is teaching, mentoring. We develop teaching goals. And those kind of settings, you develop scholarship goals. How do you want to study your teaching? How do you know method, like outcomes? If we're gonna target something on your teaching evaluation, that in 1 year, after this course has been taught 2 or 3 times, we're going to revisit that indicator, that measurement on your teaching evaluation to see if it moved. And if it didn't move, that's fine. But let's talk about that, how we can get it to move again. And if it did move, wow, let's celebrate that. That is enhancing the art of teaching. So that's one thing I do. And the other thing is we do, annual growth plans, again, around teaching, and we do measurable and observable, points there so that we can keep track of that. And I get feedback on those things. And, again, it's very common to review, we don't call them lesson plans necessarily, but we do look at the content or an outline of the course, the syllabi. I approve all those before they get disseminated to students. So we just make sure things are exactly what they need to be according to accreditation standards, university policy. And, there are times where I'm just like, hey, we chose this textbook. It's a little outdated. What are your thoughts on these options? Or, this content I suggested a new substance abuse because the old text didn't include, like I mentioned, diverse perspectives or non-Westernized approaches to treatment. So I might say to the instructor, this is a great textbook. It's now 5 years dated. And when you talk about statistics and research, right, that gets kind of dated real quickly. So I might just mention, what do you think of these? And we might discuss the pros and cons of the textbook and material, and then they adopt them. So, those are methods that I do now, and I think could be valuable when I step on. But again, figure out what's already, going on and going from there.
All right. Well, we are down to our last 15 minutes here. And I think waiting for a few more questions. Trying to think of what I can ask now. We've had kind of an ebb and flow of questions here. So
Does anyone want to know what kind of dog I have?
yes.
I have owned 3 Australian cattle dogs, so blue heelers and 1 blue-red heeler mix. So perfect for the Pacific Northwest because they are complete outdoor. They're working dogs. I don't have a farm, but they're wonderful. If anyone knows that breed.
That's excellent. Well, I don't want to keep folks longer than necessary, but I want to encourage folks if there are questions. Okay, Tia, great question. Are you connected to PPS at all?
Oh,
Or public schools?
You mean just in general?
Or I think it just means in general. Yeah.
Oh, no, I am currently connected with Multnomah Educational School District, though, doing some work there.
All right. There's a question about whether you live in Portland.
I do not live in Portland proper.
Metro area. Well, I think that we've gotten the big questions out of the way. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts for us, Dr. Yazzie, but I think we're in the last few minutes here, I'd turn it over to you.
I think I just want to thank everyone for participating this evening. I'm sure some of you I will meet again. For those of you who just joined this evening, again, privileged to meet you virtually or at least see your name and a box on the screen. And to folks who might be watching this later, just really looking forward to meeting you and getting to know you. Again, just assure you of my commitment that this is going to be a really challenging opportunity at times, but a really exciting opportunity. So I look forward to it.
Right.
I would like to say too, I'd like to thank Dr. Yazzie for being here. It's something I don't think we've done before. She hasn't even started day one here at the Police Bureau, and we made her available to community, and she's excited for the opportunity to engage and meet folks and connect. So kudos to her, and we're happy to have you, and thanks for doing this tonight.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. We'll look forward to learning more about you, Dr. Yazzie, and working with you going forward. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.